And something else I want to touch on. You mentioned that some writers, when they get inspiration, talk about the finger of God touches them. I'm convinced part of the reason I didn't give up my cigarette habit sooner than I should have, or better yet, never started, was because I once read in Atlas Shrugged, which is a terrible book. Don't read it. But Ayn Rand described one of the characters as having the flicker of inspiration at the tip of the cigarette, literally at the tip of their finger, representing the inspiration in their brain. I'm like, oh, I want to be that. That sounds great.
A lot of people read that book, and a lot of people live by that book, whatever it is.
Yes, just if some of them hadn't been in control of so many of our economic policies, that would have been swell.
That's sure.
But what I wanted to ask you about is we're talking about this very practical. It's a job that must be done. You sit down, you do it as is comfortable for you. You're writing intuitively, but is there any woo? There's a lot of woo that comes up on this show sometimes when authors will talk about characters doing things that on their own, when the magic starts to line up and things, I don't know, cosmically rhyme. I'm describing it poorly. Have you encountered this?
Yeah. I don't think it's magic. I think if you've done your job, there's an inherent reality in the show, in the character. And if you've done your job properly, they won't do X because their personality and their character and their circumstance requires them to do Y. Years ago, I think I was doing some sort of workshop, and this young man, this was high school students, and he said, all I want to do is write hunting stories. That's what he said to me. He said, but they're all the same. I don't know how to change them. I said, well, have you ever thought about writing the story from the point of view of the creature that's being hunted? And he stopped dead. And he said, whoa, I never thought of that. He's writing these stories about people killing these creatures, and he's never thought about what the creatures feel about being killed. And it sort of was an epiphany for him that he realized that he had to think about it the other way. So when you think about a character, you have to create. One of the things that I think is inherent in all good writing is something that I don't think is discussed very often, and that's logic, which is to say, a story can't do X until Y has been done, or the other way around, as the case may be. You have to build a certain reality into it. I knew a very smart editor who once said, you can't write, when you write fantasy, you have to write it as if it's historical. That is to say, there's certain rules, there's certain concepts that have to be obeyed. Otherwise, the fantasy doesn't work. Then it's just a hodgepodge of things happening. And I thought that was very smart. But I think it's true about all fiction. There's an inherent logic, or should be, in the story, so that it flows logically. You can be surprised, but it has to come out of that reality that you created. And that's the job. That's what you have to do.
Going back to this, and this, I don't want to harp on this all day, but this idea of an intuitive writer strikes me because it's close to how I work, but not quite. I like a little bit of planning. I get nervous if I don't know where I'm going entirely. As you're dealing with these historical novels, with you have to be, true to history as well as true to your characters, true to their story. Are you keeping notes along the way of things you need to know to keep straight to finish the book, or how are you keeping everything straight?
I think one of the great requirements of a writer is a good memory. I don't think people talk about that. I don't know if you develop a memory, I guess you can. But you have to remember people, you have to remember circumstance, you have to remember facts, You have to remember your own book. Yeah, let me read you something. I'm going to read you a paragraph, okay, of something I'm working on now. And this is something that takes place in the year 1774 in Boston. And I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to explain to you. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. The night's sultry heat would have kept me awake in any case, but I was so excited, I'm not sure I ever slept. Long before dawn, I crept out of our silent Hog Alley house. Happily, there was almost a full moon in a cloudless sky. Its light enabled me to make my way along deserted Newbery, Marlborough, and Cornhill streets before heading out along the Long Wharf. When I reached the end, I found, to my delight, some 300 regular soldiers lined up. They were wearing short red jackets and black leather caps, which bore their regimental number, which proclaimed them the 38th Foot. Each one carried a musket, as well as a hatchet, powder horn, and bullet pouch attached to belt or sash. A few held lit lanterns. I watched as new flints were distributed by their officers, a sure sign that some military action was afoot. Under strict discipline, there was no talk among the soldiers. When I considered their faces, I saw no emotion. In the water below, clustered around the wharf, were 13 long rowboats, Royal Navy seamen at the oars. Okay, that's the moment. Let's go back. This is the stuff that's been researched. That it was hot, that there was a full moon, that the soldiers were dressed in a certain way and carried certain implements, that they were carrying lanterns, that new flints were distributed to them, that there were 13 longboats, and that royal seamen were at the oars of these boats. None of that did I make up. All of that is fact that I've researched.
Okay.
Now stop and think. All I had to do was thread those facts together into a narrative moment, right?
Sure.
At the same time, not hitting you over the head with the fact that they're facts. I think distributing new flints that suggest the military action is taking place becomes a dynamic part of the story. But it's also true. That's what happened. And knowing that and remembering that from my research, and by the way, I can tell, you can go on the internet and get moon calendars any day of any year. I know what the moon was. And I can absorb that. Is that important to the reader, that I get the fact that there's a full moon as opposed to a half moon? No, but it helps me imagine, tell the story. But it's all researched. And that's the way I work these things. Make any sense?
It does. So how much research are you doing? Do you spend a period of time when, like, okay, I've got San Francisco, 1849. Let's learn everything that we can about that ahead of time. When do you do the research?
I was writing this thing just this morning. That's why I happened to have the page there. And I suddenly said, well, what kind of moonlight was? So I checked my moon chart for September 1, 1774. It's a full moon. That's good to know, because it makes their movements easier to relate. And for all I know, I mean, since this is based on something that really happened, maybe they chose that day because there was a full moon, right?
Okay.
Could be, I don't know. But so there it is. I can use that. And it gives it a sort of spooky feel and all the rest of that. So I use it.
So do you sit down and say, okay, did you know ahead of time that this is going to be the scene, and so you've already checked the moon? Or do you sit down, write part of the sentence, and then stop?
These soldiers have to go somewhere. So now it becomes my job to effectively describe how that works. But at the same time, trying to make it so it's narratively interesting and maybe a little suspenseful and spooky. And it helps that it's hot. Turned out to be a hot Boston summer. use it. Use it. Why not?
Makes all the sense in the world to me. So when you're going back through and you're revising and you're writing historical fiction for young adults and you want to make sure that they're engaged in the story, not checking out of a history lesson, what's the balance and when can you find that about how to stay true to what you want to present historically, but then make sure that the narrative's still moving, that you're not getting bogged down on any details?
Well, sometimes the details are interesting. I mean, the fact that this particular kind of soldier, British soldier, had a hatchet never would have occurred to me. But I think kids would be interested. I mean, I don't think they often see a soldier or think of a soldier carrying a hatchet. But as we'll see, it's part of the story, and they need those hatchets. So I got to mention that. And I think it's interesting. So I hope it is. But it's my job to make it interesting, to make it reasonable and, and full of life. I don't know.
I'm going to find the secret before we're done. I know it.
What's the secret? What do you think?
I don't know. I haven't written 83 books. You know.
But, I mean, what's the effect of the secret? Maybe that, what do you, the secret of what?
The secret of a writing career that is successful, a secret of writing 83 novels and still being able to produce Gold Rush Girl, which is engaging, interesting throughout. And maybe I'm just thinking about it too hard. It's entirely possible.
If I can't do it well, then I'm not going to be allowed to do it. Does that work?
I think that makes 100% sense. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Avi, you've had it. You've had your run. I think you should start writing greeting cards. So no more novels.